Welcome, Georgia Libraries conference goers, to our session, Process Before Technology. We are here today to share with you the quick take, a story of UGA Law Library's surprisingly simple item request web form. This is something we put together as a team during the pandemic, in response to the pandemic, and we want to tell you all about it, how we got to where we did eventually, and it was a long road where we learned a lot of lessons, and we hope to talk to you about some of those lessons today. I am Rachel Evans, Metadata Services and Special Collections Librarian. I'm also here with Marie Mize, Access Services Manager, and Sylvia Samodi, Access Services Associate. And we had the pleasure of working through so much that you are about to hear about last year and this year. First, we're going to share a short video introduction with you, and then we're going to go into some panel style session where I'm going to ask some questions of Marie and Sylvia about their firsthand experiences with the way we set this up and what some of the challenges and ultimate lessons learned from it were. So if the video doesn't work for you, you can visit it at this YouTube link, which we will put in the chat for this session. We're also going to play it for you now.
When we think of innovation, we think of cutting-edge technology, complicated systems, and brand new approaches. However, innovation is not just a purchase. At UGA Law Library, we learned through trial and error to put the process before the technology and not the other way around. Because sometimes the most innovative idea is the simplest solution. Beginning in May of 2020, our library systems team was presented with a very specific task. Access Services asked that we make patron-driven requests in our ILS possible in time for our fall 2020 reopening. This was a reasonable request. We did not want to encourage browsing of the stacks by any patrons at that time. We also had longer reshelving times due to the quarantine period following item check-ins. The natural solution, and the one specifically requested by Access Services, was to use our catalog provider, Innovative's Sierra, or so we thought. What on the surface seemed to be the right tool for the job presented several problems. First, the learning curve was steep, including more than 40 pages of initial related documentation to adjust all of the various interwoven settings to make this change possible. It required hours, which turned into days and eventually weeks of contacting Innovative tech support through phone calls and Supportal help desk tickets. Third, what we instinctively knew going into this was that we were trying to force one tool intended for items that already are checked out to work for items that were still available. This turned out to be a bigger issue than we forecasted. Fourth, how to use the request items feature for our library users. You could only access the buttons from within the catalog search or item records, and following that by logging into the library's online catalog. So, linking patrons directly to a point of request was impossible. The process had to be illustrated through multi-step signage, infographics shared on social media, and even included as segments in multiple video tutorials for incoming and returning students. And fifth, only through initial testing in the first few weeks of reopening did we realize a final issue, the turnaround time. It took over 24 hours from the point of user request until it appeared in Sierra's hold shelf. So not only was the setup and the steps for users complicated, but library staff getting notified and fulfilling the request could take up to 2 days. This final factor was unacceptable, leading staff to working around it through in-person requests or requests to pull item by phone, but also causing many communication issues between staff and patrons at the point of service due to lags in system notifications and other misunderstandings for request fulfillment. Fast forward to January 2021. We had seen the mosaic of problems from using the right tool for the wrong job. We knew we needed a simpler approach. We needed something outside the system. We needed something we could link users directly to from our website or in an email. Instead of 3 months to implement, this time we had only 1 week to create and test a new approach. So, we needed to use a tool we were familiar with, one that had zero learning curve to launch. We decided to work outside the ILS completely this time. Settled on a most basic web form built in Drupal 7, our law school and library's website CMS. In just 2 days, we had a working draft, and testing proved that email notifications to Access Services staff were almost instant, under 2 minutes from web form submission to notices in their inbox. Notices went directly to staff as well, rather than requiring them to log in to Sierra's desktop client and check the hold shelf. Users could access the new web form directly. The web form itself contained the instructions, so no multi-step signage or segments of video tutorials were needed. Although we collected fewer requests using the web form, we had higher levels of both student and library staff satisfaction. Still, contactless pickup of items was simpler to understand, easier to request, and quicker to fulfill. The lesson was process before technology, and in our case, the simplest and lowest tech solution turned out to be the best, and surprisingly, most innovative idea.
Here is a timeline of how this all went down. Our library closed March of 2020, and in April, when we realized we might not be coming back, we weren't sure when, we knew that when we did, we were going to need a way for patrons to make requests of items that were still on the shelf. At the time, we were specifically asked to use our ILS, which is Innovative Sierra, and they wanted this to happen through the online catalog, which we call Gavel. You can visit that at gavel.law.uga.edu. You will not see a request item button anymore. It took a long time to get it there, and we're still recovering from some of the aftermath of removing it. So we're here today to let Sylvia and Marie share some of their firsthand experiences of this. You've heard a little bit already about how I set it up from the video, but I'm so glad Marie and Sylvia are here with me today. On each of the following slides, I'm going to present some of the issues that I perceived and ask each of you how you felt about it, or how you experienced it firsthand, perhaps with a patron. So the biggest issues: using the right tool for the wrong job. We already talked about the monster learning curve. Hold shelf is not intended to be used this way, which it's no surprise we had so many fallout problems from this. And of course, it took forever for you to get notices. Sylvia, I really want to focus on this slide. A question for you is, what were some of the longer term problems that I know just last week you realized were the result of us using the right tool for the wrong job?
Oh, yes. Who would have thought that whatever we did and tried back more than a year ago, or year and a half by now, would have an impact just a month ago on interlibrary loan. Seemingly the two are not connected, yet I just discovered over this past summer that our system Sierra was not importing interlibrary loan requests into the OCLC website. And in the summer, we don't get that many requests, so I didn't think twice about it. I just copied and pasted and made the system work for me. But by now, with the start of the semester, the journals were bombarding me with dozens of very complicated requests, and this was getting to be a problem. It took us a while to figure it out and trace it back to the holds. Sometimes holds are necessary for interlibrary loan requests, and it turned out that that was the problem from the get-go.
One of the major unseen issues that we did not foresee, did not predict. There's a few other things on this slide here. If you're so inclined, you can even view the full one of the many short, but still too long tutorials on how to use our hold shelf to do what we were trying to do, which was contactless requests and pickups for patrons through our online catalog. Lots of Zoom calls, lots of Q&As, and so many emails. Here on the screen, you can see a picture of just one of the emails that I sent to Marie and Sylvia. I'm sorry, you guys. I sent you so many of these, and there were so many steps, and there was so much information, and there was just never an easy way to put it because it was too hard to begin with. And then, of course, there's a screen capture here as well of one of the videos that I made for you guys. Now, I want to know, honestly, because I know how it felt creating this. It was terrible. How did it feel to you as you were preparing to open?
To put it nicely, frustrating, annoying, overwhelming. Yeah, we were angry. We, in the middle of trying to do this, trying to figure out how this would work. You had the videos, we had the videos for the students to try to make it work. All of us were just trying to survive day to day. We were just trying to get the library ready for the students to come back. We had physical things that we were doing in the library for even to the point of you know, making sure we had cleaning stuff here, making sure that we had masks for people to use. It was just one more thing that we didn't need at the moment, and it was very frustrating.
Agreed.
No one needed this. I agree. No one needs
Yeah.
4 pages of this. And I just wanted our audience to see exactly what it was. I felt like this was the simplest way that I could present such a difficult, brand new workflow. And yet it was still, it's way too much. You know, in hindsight, we all instinctively knew even at the time that this was pretty unnecessary. We needed something, but this isn't what we needed. Is there anything else that the two of you would like to share? I mean, I want this to be an opportunity for you to let people know like how overwhelming it was to deal with something like this on top of all of the other stuff that you were dealing with as you prepared to reopen for a pandemic. And just how this wasn't the right approach.
Well, one of the things we've talked about so much because of this, after this, and even going forward is it really comes down to the communication. It really comes down to the issue was not discussed among access services and technical services and trying to come up with the best solution. It was, we were told, this is how you guys are going to do it. Now you figure out how to do it. And then the next breath, we were told we've got to figure out all these other things that we had never dealt with before too. So honestly, when I got that email from you, it took a while for I would even sit down and read it. I looked at it and said, this is too much right now. I can't process this.
And remember at the time, most of us were not in the building, or if we were in the building, it was staggered. So just discussing whether this could work, that could work, took 5 extra rounds of Zoom calls, of emails, of Slack conversations. And it was really hard to arrive at any kind of decision or moving forward. And the problem was that we all knew that we were trying to force a square peg in a round hole or vice versa, and it was not going to work. So we felt that it was taking time away from other very important issues of safety and physical things, tying up chairs to make sure that we were socially distancing people.
Communicating with our users was perhaps an even bigger part of this this whole scenario. It was a very difficult part. They were largely not in the building, particularly when we first rolled this out in the early fall of 2020. We had just reopened. That was the whole reason that we wanted a setup like this, was because we wanted people who weren't going to be in the building long to be able to request an item, come in and pick it up, and then leave. This is, of course, the dream that was very, very hard to pull off, even especially using the right tool, as we were told. Pretty quickly, we already mentioned how the turnaround time was just not sufficient. What I wanted to hear from both of you is to give you an opportunity to share an experience or an interaction between you and a patron as to why it wasn't fast enough. How long did it take? The original.
Forever.
Seriously, it would take anywhere between 24 and 48 hours for us circulation to receive the request that the students made it. And it was very frustrating. We had many times that a student would come up and say, I put a request in for a book. And at first I would go and look on the hold shelf in the system, and I would find their name. And then I realized, oh, wait a minute. And I'd ask them, when did you do it? Oh, I did it 2 hours ago, or I did it last night. It got to a point that we just would go, oh yeah, system hasn't even sent it to us yet. Let me go get it. And so we were working around the process to begin with, almost from day one, because it just did not work what was needed. And I also found that some of the students were really frustrated of trying to figure out how they were supposed to do this, because remember, as you mentioned, they were all not here in the buildings. Some of them were home, and they were getting a ton of information online of this is what's happening now, this is what's happening. And just to be able to find what our policies were during the shutdown and during the reopening was just overwhelming to them too.
Yes, and I'd like to add that we already knew that number 4, the course reserve items that are the most popular checkouts are not going to work within this system. So there was not much point in even getting started if this was not going to fit within the lines of what we were doing.
That was going to be my next question, was about some of the items. So this is a report that I believe I generated sometime in November of 2020. Marie and I worked together to pull some data about who was using it and how they were using it. And this is only a slice of it. The negative experiences that the two of you had, and knowing that your most popular items weren't even being factored into this at all. It's impossible for this to paint a picture that's accurate as to how it was being used and if it was successful or not. What I wanted to ask specifically was if you had some experiences where people showed up and their item wasn't there, and they had requested it.
All the time. Marie, can you recall a situation where actually there was a notification for us already before the person showed up? I can't remember one single time.
No. No, because it seemed like that the ones that I processed from getting the notification through the system, it was like 2 or 3 days later before they came and got the book. Very, very rarely.
So people shied away from actually using it because once they had this experience, they knew they could just walk in and we'll grab it for them. But then that encouraged more in-person contact than we were hoping for. Yeah. So
which was the opposite of what we were supposed to be solving.
Yes.
It backfired.
I did have a few students. I can remember one in particular that after it was so frustrating the first time, he just sent me emails and said, hey, I need this one now. I got it, and we would We just ended up
Yes.
with those conversations.
But if it wasn't you in the library that day, then the rest of us didn't get those emails.
Exactly.
And
It came straight to
created
me.
another problem. Yes.
So speaking of all of you not getting emails at the same time, finally, the idea that we had way back at the like April or May of 2020, the web form comes back and is requested of us in early January, as we are yet again about to start
Yay.
another semester. And that is the next thing that I want to ask you about. Can you compare what it was like, some of the experiences you shared about how difficult it was before, to what it was like when we launched the web form, and what those early tests were, and how instant those emails were, and it was able to go to all of you, right?
It did. It went to it went to a listserv that went to everybody who works in access services. So
What a sigh of relief.
yeah, it was, yeah, I can't tell you, it was great. I mean, it was, you talk about the weight being lifted off your shoulders. We were no longer embarrassed by not knowing something was happening, or not being able to take care of our students. You know, the emails were within a minute, you know, or two at the most, just depending how it, you know, kind of goes through the email system. The students that had used this other system last semester were thrilled that they were getting an email like within a few minutes and the book was available. They were surprised and very happy.
And I
And I
think
know-
it needed a little bit of tweaking, especially the red line being added. I remember, Rachel, it was your great idea. And it made that even easier to explain that, yes, the reserve items are still the old way and they cannot be requested through this form. And that cut down on that confusion a lot as well.
I think on my end also, the fact that we could, for the first time during this entire pandemic since we had reopened, we could actually send a link straight to the students, and we could send that link to each other, and we could have a link that said request an item here, and it opened the web form, and you went to one place instead of having to follow all these different steps and buttons and log into the catalog. You could just go to the form and you could link to it from anywhere. That was so much, that was a big relief to me, that it was easier for us to just give the point of request to the people that needed it. Well, thank you everyone for being with us today, especially Marie and Sylvia for sharing your experiences. I would love to continue this conversation. I think that this is just one story about how hopefully we have learned some things through the pandemic. We've learned a lot, not just about using the right tool for the wrong job and simplifying our processes and putting users at the forefront, but also about some of the challenges that are ongoing with communicating with each other and with getting other people to listen to our ideas up front, instead of things needing to be a total failure before we listen to the people who are actually doing the work, which would be the three of us. I have created a Padlet here. I'm going to put this link in the chat for this session, and I really encourage you to visit it. We've got a couple of ideas there, including the one we've presented today about some problems that we feel like are overly complicated in our libraries that could use simplification. So if you have an idea about how to simplify something, or if you just have a problem, feel free to use this as a brainstorming area. We'll get in there and comment on one another's ideas, and maybe help each other simplify things and put the user at the beginning of the experience and the process before the technology. Thanks again, Marie and Sylvia, for being here. And thank you everyone who's been listening. We want to leave you with one final thought as we close, which is let's all think about how we can learn from our experiences just like this one from this past year, and what we can do to perhaps avoid some of these challenges in the future.
Thank you.